Officer James to a participant from an attendee. I'm not sure if you have that power, Mickey. Sergeant James is in the attendee list over there. And then I think we're pretty good to kick off. Great. Great. Commissioner Chang, can I turn it over to you to welcome? There we go.
I'd be happy to. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. I just had a couple of opening comments, and then I'm going to hand it over to Brittany to lead us through today's work. But this is our last meeting, and Megan and I just wanted to say that developing a strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness is one of the primary duties of this task force, and it's really exciting to see the plan starting to take shape. I'm really looking forward to working on the implementation of the strategies and the actions in this plan with you, and wanted to thank you all for your input so far, for your input today, and for your input into the action planning that's going to come after today. I hope we can produce a plan that the community can rally around and that can help us focus our efforts and resources to have a huge impact on homelessness in Deschutes County. With that, Brittany, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Chang. I'm going to share my screen real quick, lift up our group agreements real quick, and do a quick overview of the agenda. I'll share the group agreements for you all to read to yourself from our last meeting. Today is our last meeting, the 6th that folks have been joining since June. Thank you so much, Commissioner Chang, Councillor Perkins, and all of you for your commitment to this work over the last 6 months. Today's agenda is going to open with some updates, as we always do. I'll start with an update on the joint office, and then I'll turn it over to Eric and Nikki. And then we're going to get into the meat of the strategic plan. We're going to talk through the vision, the strategies, the milestones that I hope folks had a chance to review. And then we're going to chart the course for action planning and finalizing the strategic plan. Our last topic for today is going to be the joint office, and we'll share a bit about that in a minute. We'll close today with a few next steps, but it certainly won't be the end of our shared work together. So real quick, to jump into updates and preview a bit of the joint office conversation we'll be having later this week. Folks will recall that at our last meeting, and I can take these group agreements down. At our last meeting, we talked through some of the core functions and qualities that folks would want to see in a joint city-county office to support efforts to prevent and end homelessness in Deschutes County. And we spent a good amount of time hammering out what core functions might be of that joint office. And just, I think, 2 days after that, brought it to the Bend City Council and the Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners joint meeting to talk through the concept of a joint office, to share some of the insights that came from you all about why a joint office would be is needed and how it could best support the community. Both the County Commission and the City Council committed to continuing to build out this concept together of a joint office with some support from the Association of Oregon Counties, the League of Oregon Cities, some state legislators. So that work is still underway. During that joint meeting, we were asked to do some more work to shape the concept, specifically asked for a mission statement for the joint office. So once we get through the strategic plan components today, we're gonna start to shape a bit of a mission statement for a proposed joint office for the county commission and city councilors to work from. Eric, I'm gonna turn it over to you for a managed camp update, but also feel free to supplement that joint office update.
Sure, yeah, just to add, we committed to come back to both the council and the commission in January with a more fleshed out proposal. And so staff has been working, city and county staff have been working on kind of the framework for that plan that includes a business plan as well as elements of an intergovernmental agreement between the agencies. And then as part of that effort, we've been asked by the League of Oregon Cities, who's helping support that legislation, to pilot up to 5 city-county partnerships that would be part of this legislative concept and funding, $1 million available for each of the 5 pilot programs. So there's a letter that was solicited by the League of Oregon Cities due December 10th between those to express interest. So we are working on a letter with Deschutes County right now to demonstrate our interest and submit by that December 10th deadline. And that would be legislation that would be discussed and hopefully approved in the short session, which takes place roughly in February and early March. So just a little more additional information about that effort. Mickey, anything else before I give an update on the managed camp?
You got it all. Thank you, sir.
Okay. And then on managed camp, so we have, if you've been tracking that has been top of mind for the city council, and we have created a request for proposal that was reviewed by council and is now out there in the universe. And so proposals are due December 9th. I see Carolyn Egan on the call too. If we have a pre-proposal meeting, so we'll have an indication of who is going to be submitting proposals, I think later this week. So that is in work that's in progress. And as you know, that's one of the key strategies for the outline that was part of this packet. So that work will continue, and there's hopefully as we get more in today's meeting, there'll be opportunities for more engagement on expanding our capacity, our shelter capacity, and that's one key component of it. But that request for proposal is really the mechanism for the city to engage providers to help us actually implement that and get more beds online.
Great. Thanks, Eric. I'm going to turn it over to Mickey for an update on some of the visual tools that will be accompanying the strategic plan, and then we'll open it up to questions before we move into the rest of the agenda. Mickey, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So some members of the task force brought up the need for a visual narrative for something easy and simple to understand in layman's terms and storytelling format for the general public, including elected officials, the media, and for many of us who are not houselessness experts. The goal for the content will be to humanize our houselessness community members and tell their stories, to educate, increase awareness, give all a holistic perspective and unbiased knowledge of the houselessness ecosystem in our region, so that we're all coming from the same set of data, understanding, and knowledge. And it will also be tied in with our strategic plan that you all are creating today, and provide information about a joint houselessness office, should that be the route the city or cities and county takes. This project is funded by the City of Bend. We went through an RFP process and have selected a local agency, Zoe Agency, whose owner, Sonia, has lived experience of being houseless in her youth. The timeline for this is, the goal is to expedite the timeline. So we may publish early January 2022. And big thanks to Bob Bohack with Jericho Road and Oasis Village, Evan Hendricks with Shepherd's House, John Riggs with the Helpers for already connecting with Zoe Agency, and for helping to connect us with houseless community members who are able and willing to share their stories.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mickey. I'm really glad that work is taking off, and I got a little bit of a sneak peek yesterday. And I'm really excited to see how this can support you all in your work, particularly I've noticed since I came into the community just how much service providers are strapped for capacity. And I know that's something everyone here knows, but we heard loud and clear that there are more community engagement and public education tools needed around this issue. So Mickey, thank you so much for hearing that and making sure we move forward with that to launch the strategic plan in a way that recognizes that public education and public engagement is critical to achieving our vision, which we're going to get into in just a moment. So thank you, Mickey. Are there any questions about any of the updates that were offered today? Okay, great. And I think, did I see a hand go up? I don't think so. Okay, and if, Kayla, if you have a chance, if you could promote John Lodice to a panelist, that would be great. Okay, so we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of our conversation today, the strategic plan. I am going to share my screen again. Can everybody see that? Quick outline of the strategic plan. So you had this in your inboxes rudely right before a long weekend, and for that I apologize. I didn't schedule our meetings for the end of November, but I also appreciated that that was a hard deadline to get to you all before the long weekend. I hope folks had a chance to review. We'll walk through the strategic plan, outline a bit today. We can go in depth wherever we need to. We want to make sure that we're meaningfully gathering feedback and your input here, because this is shaped from our conversations over the last 6 months. So nothing here is baked yet. It's merely something for us to react to and build upon. So the strategic plan structure is based on the conversation I think we had in September about what the scope should be. It sets out a proposed 10-year vision. Where are we getting to by 2032? Some 5-year milestones to make sure we're on track to achieving that vision, and strategies that can be implemented, particularly in the first 3 years, and then revisited to make sure that we're driving toward those milestones. And sorry, I wrote actions here. There's strategies and actions for the 3-year timeline. Implementation of the strategic plan will be led jointly by the city and any cities that sign on in the county, or by a joint office should it be, or when it is established. So I'm going to walk through the vision, the milestones and the strategies, and then get us into conversation today. So please forgive my mic hogging, but I'm eager to get your thoughts and input. The vision is the only place that I am going to read word for word what we laid out here, because I think it's really powerful, and I want to make sure that folks have spent time with it. So our proposed vision is that in 2032, housing instability in all forms is rare, brief, and non-recurring in Central Oregon. The community uses its strengths and resources to ensure that anyone who is unsafe, experiencing a health crisis, or facing housing instability is able to access the support they need to regain safety, recover, and thrive. The region's growth and wealth is reflected in the quality of life and safety of all residents of Deschutes County. And so that's the vision we laid out that feels deliberately a stretch and achievable for Deschutes County. This is intended to echo what I've heard, what you all have shared throughout the course of the last 6 months, and what we've heard from the community about the Deschutes County folks want to be living in 10 years. So from here, we built out a series of milestones that we want to make sure that in the next 5 years we're hitting, so that we know we're pursuing this 10-year vision. We know we're on track. These milestones are shaped by some of the urgent priorities I've heard from folks and some of the necessary priorities that really need to be stood up in the short term in order to get to that long-term vision. So the 4 milestones that are suggested here are around chronic homelessness, youth homelessness, and prevention and diversion, ensuring that all individuals and families that are at immediate risk of experiencing homelessness can access resources. And lastly, that we're making service provision widely available to people experiencing homelessness to the extent needed in the community. So these are our milestones that we're suggesting, and we're going to get into a conversation in just a minute to pick those apart and make sure that they're the right milestones to be tracking toward in the next 5 years. The strategies that we're suggesting will drive us there are addressing the crisis of unsheltered homelessness, improving services, integrating and prioritizing this 10-year vision into all affordable housing planning and opportunities, establishing a joint office, as we've talked about, and supporting and leading public-private partnerships and community engagement to ensure that this is a community-wide response to the crisis of housing instability and houselessness in Deschutes County. So that is my very quick overview, hoping that folks had time to dig into this over the last week, but I want to pause and see if folks have questions about the content before we get into some specific questions around the vision. Were there any questions about structure here or the format? Okay. I'm slowly and quickly going to share the full text of some of the strategies, should we need that as we get into that conversation. So to first focus on our vision and the 10-year look ahead, in 2032, apologies for the error here, it should be 2032, since the strategic plan will be launching in 2022, 10 years from there is 2032, believe it or not. How does the vision resonate with you all? Does it capture your hope for Deschutes County in 10 years? Tammy, sure, jump on in.
Thank you. First of all, great work. And it's really exciting to see this come together. One of the things that sticks out is the notation of Central Oregon. And so it's more just the theme of how this works regionally. And I don't want to send us sideways at all, but obviously, Deschutes County is the largest hub, if you will, of employment and of people and of really need in a lot of regard. But how will this play into a regional effort as well, making sure that we are addressing it across those boundaries that we share in terms of commute shed and employment and education, health and wellness as well.
Great, thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that highlight, and I wonder if there's an edit here to clarify that our purview right now is Deschutes County, and lifting that up in that first sentence, but making it clear that the intent is to support all of Central Oregon in this, in the region's growth and thriving. So maybe switching where we say Deschutes County and Central Oregon might be the right move, and I'm seeing some nods, so we'll count on that edit. Great. Thanks, Tammy, and thanks for the feedback. What else resonates with folks? Either what stands out, what may not be here that you were hoping to see or that you would like to see in Deschutes County in 2032?
Can I just jump in that I really appreciate this, and I think it's an amazing job. And it really captures the felt sense that I've gotten from the community in the meetings. I just keep looking at the experiencing a health crisis, because in our world, there's many health crises that we are not going to take care of by 2032. So I haven't come up with it, but I'm just wondering if that's a little broad.
Mm-hmm. I hear that. I think the intent there, I feel like you will have a sense of the intent of immediate necessary support is immediately necessary for that crisis, even if it is 911 emergency support, be accessible to everyone. But health crisis, absolutely. Cancer is a health crisis. We will hope that everyone can get the care they need for that in 2032, but we may not be there. So maybe we could work together. Elaine, I'll pitch you maybe some refined language around that to be clear that it's the emergent, urgent health crises where care is not currently available to people experiencing housing instability or living in unsafe situations.
I'd be happy to help, and it may be fine. I'd just like to reflect on it a little bit and would be happy to dialogue.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts on the vision, even just what you love about it, or if it's, if there's something sticking in your craw about it that doesn't feel quite right, that we can maybe keep finessing?
Yeah, I'll just offer, I appreciate the 10-year focus, but I actually like the 2030 rather than 2032. I mean, that just seems forever away. And this is something we need to address, and we need to do all we can. So I would support pushing us and keeping the 2030 as the goal. We can extend it, we'll update it as time goes on, but initially I like the 2030 rather than 2032.
So an interesting conversation that I had with Councillor Perkins and Commissioner Chang and Mickey a few weeks ago was around this framing of rare, brief, and non-recurring. That mirrors the federal definition of preventing and ending homelessness. But what we architect here is actually something broader. It goes into housing and housing instability, not just homelessness. So Nick, what I would say, not to get into semantics, but by 2030, we do need that system that has meaningfully prevented and ended homelessness. And by 2032, we need to make sure that anyone experiencing housing instability is immediately met with the support they need, which I do think will need 10 years to build out. Does that click with you? And we can also, if the 2030 is what's compelling, we can find a way to finesse the difference between those two. But that was some of the thought behind it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good distinction because of the housing instability, right? Just in terms of building the necessary supply of housing is going to take longer. That's a great clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, with nothing further and with a few edits, it feels like this is the vision that the task force is recommending and committing to moving forward with. Is that right? Any further objections or any objections? I'm seeing a lot of nods. Awesome. Great. Thank you all. This is really beautiful. I don't mean to harp on it, but it was so fun to draft and write because it was the most beautiful ideas that you all had about the community throughout our conversations. So really glad to see that this is resonating with others as well. So now we're going to get into the milestones that we talked through, the 4 milestones earlier. And I know that folks had some questions and comments about these, so I have a feeling we'll spend some deep time here. First question is, do the milestones reflect the issues raised in the gaps analysis? Is there anything you were expecting to see here that you don't see addressed within the milestones? Keeping in mind that they are the 5-year kind of goals, 5-year milestones to hit on our way toward that 10-year vision, that there's other work that will need to be done that's reflected in the strategies. But these milestones are what will indicate that we are well on our way to addressing the gaps we saw throughout our work together and throughout your work every day. Yeah, Commissioner Chang.
Because we call out young people, it also, it kind of begs the question, what about people who are vulnerable on the other end of the age spectrum? And so I'd be curious if people felt like it would be appropriate to say no young people or seniors will experience housing instability without immediate connections to support services and shelter. We're sort of getting into vulnerable populations, and then that might invite us to, list every single vulnerable population there is. But I could just, when I read young people the second or third time, it just made me feel like, well, that's, is that ageist or, not paying attention to the vulnerable people on the other end of the age spectrum.
I hear that, and that's not something that jumped out to me immediately in the data. The reason we're looking at young people here is the drastic increases in unaccompanied young people, which is associated with their vulnerability. And you're absolutely right that on the other end of the age spectrum, life so often mirrors itself like that. Elderly adults are highly vulnerable. So I agree. And I'm curious what folks think that milestone could look like. What is deliberately a stretch, deliberately challenging, but achievable in the next 5 years around supporting elderly adults? Is it mirroring this youth milestone? Is it no young people or elderly adults will experience housing instability? Do we think that we'll be able to get to that vision in 5 years? Folks more familiar with the data may have a deeper understanding, or the opportunities, right? There's a lot of behavioral health opportunities coming down the pike in Central Oregon, which includes, hopefully includes home and community-based supports. This isn't something that maybe the homeless service system will be responsible for alone. So it could very well be achievable. John, then Colleen.
Yeah, I was just following up on Phil's comments. So the three groups that we encounter as being the most vulnerable and kind of in the most precarious situation and often the hardest to keep safe at a shelter or keep stable in a shelter situation are unaccompanied minors, elderly who often have very, very significant mental health and physical health issues. Bordering on nearly everyday crisis for some of them. And third, families with very young children. So they're all vulnerable because they're not the kind of people we can just quickly get off the streets on a low barrier shelter basis. And we often encounter, and Tara can speak to this a little bit, we often encounter that there aren't enough beds to go around to place those people in sort of the stable situation that they need, and also the intensive kind of care and attention that they need to really meet their immediate health needs a lot of the time, or their immediate safety needs a lot of the time. So I think those are three high priority groups.
Thank you so much, John. That's really helpful. Colleen, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I was just going to respond to Commissioner Chang's comment also, and note that we're not actually tracking individuals over age 65 in the way that we're tracking youth. So I think that, I've seen a big need among the elderly population, and I believe that's expected to grow. Like Brittany said, it won't be tackled solely by the homeless services continuum, but that's not something we're currently looking at through the point in time count. So it might be as much of an increase as the youth. We just haven't seen those numbers.
Thank you. That's helpful to know.
I agree, Colleen. I think that what we're seeing is, and a voice from St. Charles probably can speak more to this, it's that, as we said the first meeting, it's that gap of individuals that are houseless that need assisted living, that there's no bridge there. So, and Colleen, you're right, because they're typically not the ones that we're gonna come across at point of time. They're not able to go to those hubs, or there's a lot of barriers in place. So I'm gonna echo and agree with the comments.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks so much. Other thoughts here? I just want to note, Jeremy, I see your note in the chat. We don't typically do live Q&A. Your question is certainly a valuable one, and there are varying definitions of young people. Typically, the definition of youth homelessness is around unaccompanied young adults under the age of 24. And so that's who we're talking about here, but we can follow up with you offline to make sure you have the resources you need to engage in the issue.
And then
yeah,
just for clarification, so the experiencing chronic homelessness. So I'm going to go back to, is this the HUD definition of chronic homelessness, or can someone elaborate on the second milestone of what chronic homelessness is referring to?
Can I hold on that to get through the young people and elderly, that milestone, and then move there? Because I think we'll have some deeper conversation there as well. But definitely. So what I may be feeling a tension that I'm happy to be shut down on. I want to make sure that I keep saying these words, but deliberately challenging but achievable with these milestones and the vision. We want to push the community. We don't want to look at this in 2 years and say we're never going to get there on these milestones. We want them to be within sight. And this isn't about being inspirational. This is about getting the community's work done, bringing all the resources we have to bear to the table. But by expanding that first bullet into elderly adults and recognizing the systems connections that are going to be needed there, I'm wondering if we want to pick up what John shared about families with very young children and maybe look at this third milestone and make sure that families with very young children are connected to prevention and diversion resources in the next 5 years, with potentially paths for all individuals and families to have those connections. And maybe that's something, maybe I'm over-indexing here, being too cautious. I'm just concerned about the community's capacity to drive toward all of these milestones at once. And I want to recognize that families with very young children is not something that we've addressed in these milestones. And I hear loud and clear that very severe vulnerability, John, that you mentioned, and the impact on children's development, of course, as well. So prevention and diversion is often a core tool in preventing and ending family homelessness, making sure that as soon as families are approaching a crisis, they can call for the resources that they need to prevent any further housing instability. And so I'm curious how that resonates for folks, or if you think we can drive toward all four of these in the next 5 years and really hit these milestones. And it's quite all right if we don't have strong opinions quite yet. A little preview, I think I mentioned in my note, we're going to be doing some small group discussions to hammer out the actions that go under these strategies. And maybe that's where we'll figure out what exactly is going to be achievable but challenging over the next 5 years. So that's something we can bring all of these components into those conversations as well, if there aren't gut reactions today.
Hey, Brittany, it's Keith. I think one thing to think about, let me make sure that this is working. Right, there's people are getting stuck on the first bullet about the young people, which means whenever the roadshow happens, we start going to different electeds, they're going to do the same thing. So as you look at that, if the group decides to wordsmith it, great. If not, I think you can waterfall down these actions in a different order that would get people there more logically. You know, maybe start at some of the broadest ones, which is, you know, maybe the last one, and work your way towards the young people, and you'll have less curiosity around it.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you, Keith. So from now on, we're going to read this slide from the bottom up. I think I actually did it in the exact reverse of what you're suggesting, which often happens when I structure something. Just read it backwards and it'll click. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate that. So Tara, to your question around chronic homelessness, I think there's a lot of questions couched in this milestone that we wanted to get feedback on. We don't explicitly say 150 units of permanent supportive housing. We could, and that is what we're alluding to here. The milestone we set out is, again, intentionally and deliberately challenging, and factors in current development plans, but also current development roadblocks. And so in writing it, to be totally frank, I was less focused on HUD's definition of people who are verified as experiencing chronic homelessness, and rather ensuring that we are progressively developing the permanent supportive housing and deeply affordable housing and services that we know so many people who are living outside in Deschutes County need, even if they're not currently counted or considered to be experiencing chronic homelessness. That number is only going to increase in the next couple of years, likely. And so I'm not sure if that's a satisfactory answer, or if you had other ideas about how to make this milestone more concrete or clear.
Yeah. Maybe Eliza might have an idea. I just know those of us that live in the chronic HUD language, that when we read chronic, it means something different than what that term may imply. So I would suggest looking at potentially a different phrase or word. But Eliza, I would love to hear if you feel the same way, or if I'm just being nitpicky.
About the wording of chronic homelessness as it relates to youth or just in general?
I think just in general with that, maybe I'm thinking like service point chronic homelessness definition.
Right. Yeah, I think like as a continuum, we've prioritized those folks. But I mean, I think as specific as we need to be in here, I'm pretty open. I don't know.
I appreciate the flag and the clarification, Tara, because something I don't want to do is to box us solely into HUD's prioritization criteria, because it may slow down progress in some ways. But I want to work with HLC to make sure that this is supportive language. And so we can maybe go offline to see how to frame this in the most comprehensive way to make clear the direction the community is headed in, using both HUD resources and other local resources to develop the housing and supports needed.
Well, I think you need to define what your chronic homelessness is for us to be able to know if we meet that benchmark. I don't care what that definition is, but we need to decide.
Yeah, I think if we use that language, then it most definitely points to like the HUD definition of chronic homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's what we want to go with, then that's appropriate. But that's definitely what it alludes to.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not what the milestones are meant to be defining, then we shouldn't use the word chronic.
I think chronic homelessness is appropriate here. This number intentionally is the number of people counted. It's very close to the number of people, double the number of people that were counted in the point in time count this year as experiencing chronic homelessness, assuming growth in that population over the next 5 years. A question that Commissioner Cheng raised that I thought was really helpful and something we wanted to bring to the group is whether we should include these as development goals. Right now, they're very person-centered. How will individuals and families be supportive? What will they have access to? And Commissioner Cheng was asking, should we integrate development goals around program types, around shelter units, around or shelter beds, around rapid rehousing units and other program types? So I'm curious how that resonates with folks. Again, these are coming from a person-centered orientation, but we could also integrate either into the strategies or here into the milestones, some development goals, if we think that will be more helpful to the community, to be clear about here are the component types, the program types that we're going to be on track to developing in the next 5 years. It's balancing a little bit between system administrators and service providers and the community understanding more broadly what we're doing for individuals and families here. So I'm not sure that I have, I don't want to sway the conversation one direction or another. So I'll open it up to folks about whether these resonate as person-centered or whether we want to integrate some more concrete development goals into our milestones. Commissioner Cheng, did I reflect your question accurately? Okay.
Well, I would just chime in that when we were writing the Regional Health Improvement Plan section on stable housing and supports, we had this exact same discussion and decided to keep the wording around supportive housing units as the emphasis. And so that seemed to resonate with both service providers and non. And so we did choose to do that, but I can see the pros and cons both ways.
Mm-hmm. Colleen, go ahead and then we'll turn to Commissioner Cheng.
Yeah, and I guess I'd echo what Elaine said. I know that Portland's Joint Office of Homeless Services recently commissioned a pretty extensive and expensive study looking at how many permanent supportive housing units should be developed like brick and mortar and how many should be scattered site. And I just think that like there is like a number and the formula and financing difference for all those. And I just wonder if differentiating between those at this point with this group might be beyond the scope of what we're able to decide, given how much might have to go into making those decisions.
I agree that tracks, and it feels like as we get into the strategies conversations and action planning, we can get more concrete about what it's going to take to do those projections. Yeah, so Colleen, I hear stable housing and supports resonating with you as the framing here. Okay. Commissioner Chang.
The person-centered versus unit or bed-centered kind of approach to milestones. I don't have an opinion on that, but if we want this particular milestone that we're looking at, the 150, if we want to be more consistent with HUD terminology, and we want to use the word chronic in the way that HUD uses the word chronic, we could. I was thinking we could rephrase this bullet to be 150 people experiencing chronic homelessness will be permanently and supportively housed and receive ongoing wraparound services based on their stated needs. So that kind of like integrates the formal terminology and kind of flags that as permanent supportive housing, but hopefully still makes it layman's terms, like not so jargony that people glaze over.
That's great. That's a thumbs up for me, but maybe I shouldn't sway the conversation. Tara, I know Tara, Eliza, Colleen, others, does that resonate?
It does with me, but I also live in jargon land. And I use the term chronic homelessness, both when I'm writing forms to really adhere to the HUD definition, and then kind of in a more broad way, just like when I'm writing the Fuse website. And I think that just chronic homelessness does have an immediate connotation to a lay person reading it, is my impression. And the HUD definition, I think does kind of capture who we're thinking about here. And it's a little more broad than I had initially thought. Like someone doesn't have to be receiving Social Security and have that level of a documented disability to fall into that category. So yeah, a long way of saying I feel good with that language.
Great. And some of that flexibility within the definition, now I'm going to get into wonky land, opens up space for similar program types that are similar to permanent supportive housing, but not exactly permanent supportive housing. There's a plus model that HUD has rolled out. There's quite a few different models. So I really like that we're zeroing in on the people, the supports, and the housing that they will receive without predetermining exactly what that'll look like. To your point, Colleen, it doesn't feel like we're quite there as far as exactly what the models need to look like, but we sure do know we need them. Great. Okay. Thank you all. I want to keep working through the milestones here. Let me get back to the questions. Here we are. Are there any high priorities that the community wants to pursue that aren't included or alluded to in these milestones? And we already got to our last question here. So is there anything you expected to see in the milestones you've heard as a priority in the community that we didn't reflect here in these milestones? Wow. Okay. I don't want to get too excited, but I think I've given my facilitator 10 seconds on this one. 10 seconds of silence, which is very difficult for me. I'm really excited. Maybe I'm just being a dweeb here, but I kind of want to sit with these milestones for a minute and just really celebrate that you all are committed to this in the next 5 years. It kind of makes me emotional that we've not only identified the gaps, but we're looking at what it's going to take, and folks are committed. I haven't heard a word of that's too much, we can't. So that is incredible, and I'm excited, and I'm going to keep moving us into our conversation around the strategies. So our strategies, again, these strategies are kind of the how we're going to achieve these milestones in the next 3 to 5 years. These strategies, I'm suggesting that we bake in for 3 years, recognizing they may need to change, may need to be updated, amended based on what's working, what's not working, based on what people with lived experience are telling us works and doesn't work in the community. But these are the 5 strategies that you all had a chance to review. So I'm curious which feel most important to you and which feel like they may be the most difficult to implement. And you may want to switch your screen to the full document if you have it in front of you with the full strategies laid out. I couldn't get them on one slide in a way that it readable for anyone, but I can flip back to the full text if we need to. So which feel most important to you? Or which resonate and get you excited?
Well, I'll just jump in. It seems like establishing a joint office should be perhaps the highest priority, because that's effectively our infrastructure to implement the plan, at least with the county and 1 or more cities.
That's what I was thinking exactly. It's just that they're all really important, but I think that we have to have that joint office in order to be able to do all of this. I think it's really important.
This is Kristen Tobias. I would say that after that joint office is built, working on the 5th strategy there, I think it's been kind of disheartening to see and hear about some of the comments just like around the managed camps that we're hoping to get going. And I think just the figure that 65% of the people experiencing homelessness in our community are homeless for the first time. I think just figures and facts like that could go a long way with educating the community that these are our neighbors that are now on the streets.
Yes, yes, yes.
And thank you to those of you in public office who continue to hear the onslaught of complaints.
Okay. Hey, Brittany, can I ask a couple questions? It's Keith again. I'm asking them to the group and one of them to Nick. On 2, so improving services for people experiencing homelessness, is that how we want to write it? Or do we want to align and deepen, or align and increase the capacity of services, right? Because we know that alignment always kind of needs to occur at times. And that I think we also know that we need more services as well to be able to deal with the population that we've got.
Yeah, Keith, I had the same thought. I didn't share it earlier. I didn't know if improving was the right term. Improving, expanding, aligning. There's a lot of those concepts that I was thinking about as well. And I would actually defer to Molly for her perspectives on that as well. I agree.
Okay, so I'm looking at this. So I'm reading this. Okay, I'm reading this with an eye towards some of the electeds and the way they see things, and so I see I see the expanded language here, but I still think we should think about telling them exactly what we mean, so they can't like ding our wings when we say improving. And so there's a certain amount of attention deficit that we have to help manage for them.
This is Stacy. Can I just add something to what Keith said? When I see improving services, I think I jump to the conclusion that the services currently being provided are not good services, that we're not doing our jobs. So I think increasing services is, I don't know, that's kind of the language I would go more, that we need more capacity and an increase in services for people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. That's where I went to, Stacy, with it. Was when I initially read it, it was like, oh, that doesn't feel great from a service provider perspective. It seems like it's a assessment of how are the services that everybody is currently providing. I don't think that was the intention at all. So I would say increasing, expanding, really, we need more. And especially our, CBOs need, more ability to expand because they do great work.
I think it would be helpful to clarify there's two different ways you can expand. And one is to just make more available, make more beds available, make more detox available. But there's also making when the services are available. What's the scope of making the services available? Like when are those services triggered? Because a lot of times there are parameters that the services need to have before they can be provided to certain clients. And I think we need to take a look at, do we need to expand the circumstances under which services become available to folks?
And from our conversations so far, it's felt like both by necessity in program design, but also in scarcity of resources, that's become the reality. And so as we get into action planning and really drilling down into these strategies, I think that's a really strong point. As we create more availability, is it also possible to make them available sooner and in a more nimble way to people? Yeah. Commissioner Chang.
I just wanted to say that I agree with the idea of using expanding versus improving, but I wanted to go back to the order of these strategies. And while I agree that in terms of workflow, the establishing the joint office and doing awareness and education work in the community is I think strategically like the first things we need to do. I'm just trying to think about who's going to be reading this strategic plan, and I could see people who are skeptical about this work, this whole body of work, wanting to see the current 1, 2, and 3 first. People who are skeptical about about working on homelessness. They want to see you're going to create units, you're going to provide services, you're going to address housing affordability. Because the other stuff, establishing a joint office, like the skeptics could look at those and be like, okay, number 4 and say, so you're going to set up bureaucracy, and then number 5, they're going to say, and then you're going to try and brainwash us. That this is a problem and that you have the right answer. So I think kind of there's an argument for keeping the 1, 2, and 3 that we have as 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, and Phil, if I can jump off that, I mean, one of the things that we've talked about before is that it's important for the community to know that even should this joint office not get established, this work is still going to continue and it's still going to be under the strategic plan. So I agree with what you're saying, Phil.
One thing and I have to apologize, I don't remember the whole plan, but when I was in Washington State, there was a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and it was rare, brief, and one time, which we found often is contradictory. That if we're going to have it be one time, that sometimes it's not going to be brief. And I think that 10-year plan kind of blew up because of some of the language. The reality is, are we going to be able to end homelessness, or are we going to be able to reduce it? And I know that's just semantics, but I think there's some skepticism in people when we come with this 10-year plan, when some of the language indicates that we're going to end it, when I think the reality is our hope is to offer more services and support to people and reduce it. And I know I'm throwing a huge kink in it, but just some language to be thinking about.
Stacey, I don't think you are throwing a kink here. The 10-year plans failed everywhere. In every city and state that created one, it didn't happen. Veteran homelessness has been ended in a couple of states, in many cities. Chronic homelessness has been ended in some communities, but we did not get there with the 10-year plans. And so when we were as a task force first hammering out what will this look like, I think that's why we went for a 10-year vision of where we want to go, being really pragmatic, knowing or being able to project out the resources we'll have or can focus on developing the funding that's not available yet to end homelessness in the community over the next 3 to 5 years, and giving us a chance to reset in 5 years and say, okay, what is going to be needed to get here in the next 5 years? Now, that may also feel semantic, but I think the resource development was a real key and missing piece of a lot of the 10-year plans. It was clear what we needed to do. It was not clear how we were going to do it pragmatically. What dollars would be raised, how that would be coordinated and implemented was not in most of the strategic plans as I've seen them. So I'm curious if there's language here, Stacy, that feels like it's setting us up to fail at all in the next 5 years with the milestones specifically. And let me get back to these.
I think the words that I get a little concerned about is when we say no young people, and so words like all and no can be a little bit, I think, a little overwhelming for some people, because I think when they see them, if we're looking at community members, whether housed or unhoused, there's like, oh, that's not going to happen. And then you lose them from the get-go of the language. So just something maybe to consider in when we use kind of words like no and all.
Yeah. And there's a double negative here that we can correct. We can say young people will be immediately connected to community supports and shelter before or as in any housing crisis or experience of housing instability. We can reframe it to be in the affirmative so that we're not saying no, none, it's ended, and keep us away from getting into that conversation, because you're absolutely right that
I like the affirmative language. Yeah, and I apologize for being off camera. My internet is not stable, so my apologies.
That's okay. All good. Okay.
I'll just bring up the word chronic again, because Brittany, you just said when you were talking about, and some communities have ended homelessness for chronic individuals, that for a very small number that fit into the HUD definition of chronic. And so that can't be compared to someone's 10-year plan to end homelessness. Those are two completely different things. And I think if we just throwing it out there again, you guys can stop me. Someone's texting me. If you're saying chronic, sure, we could probably meet a goal and say we ended it for chronic homelessness. So just in verbiage land, keeping that in mind. Brittany, can you pop to the number one, the strategy, the first one? Mm-hmm. And Stacy, if you're okay with me piggybacking on you, it was, actually, let me go to my email because that's not the one that I was looking at. So the email, it says, supporting services, I'm on number one, addressing providers and opening more shelters, lowering barriers to existing shelters. So that right there, I think it should change, because I don't think we're looking at lowering barriers of existing shelters. It's expanding the shelters that have lower barriers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I also, again, I really appreciate your focus on language, Tara. It is a beast to be drafting these things solo, and that is no excuse. I should have been more careful with the language here, because you're absolutely right. And I see that. In my mind, I was thinking about the difficulty that folks have literally getting to shelter, literally accessing getting there, having a roof over their head, the movement around in and out of shelter during a day, that. But you're absolutely right that expanding low barrier shelter and increasing access to shelter is what we're talking about here, and what I've heard. Okay, great.
Yeah, that actually brings up a point of integration between existing services. So example, integration between high barrier and low barrier shelters. I mean, sometimes there's a flow back and forth because some people are meant and are ready to go to high barrier shelter and step into case management and move on and to a higher level. And at our low barrier shelter, we're always looking for folks to see if they're showing signs that that's where they're ready to go out of our low barrier shelter. And the same thing can happen. There are some people who are not ready to be at a high barrier shelter, and then we're here. And so integration, it's usually a matter of communication and kind of just always knowing what other folks are doing and where they're doing it, and being ready to, because you can shelter people by sending them somewhere else sometimes, and making sure that they get connected to that other shelter where they really need to be. And that can happen with other types of services like mental health and medical treatment. So I think maybe, I don't know if a reference to integration, increasing integration and communication might, I don't know if that'll clarify it or add too much detail or whatever, but that's what comes to mind when we talk about, getting people into the right shelter, getting people to where they need to be at this moment, I think is really,
That's great. I agree that language would strengthen this strategy as an addition. Okay. I'm going to bring us back to our discussion questions around the strategies. Apologies for the whiplash on our slides here. Okay, we do need to wrap this conversation in the next 5 minutes or so. So I want to pull them all back up and see, are there any strategies that are missing here or components of strategies? Colleen.
Sure, I don't know whether this would fit into an existing strategy, and I didn't see it in the expanded language, but something to acknowledge that this is an issue beyond the scope of what our city and county can accomplish on their own and with local resources. And if there's some level of advocacy or policy work that could be done to advocate at the state and federal level for expanded resources coming to us. So I think that feels important to me, just that it's not something that Bend and Deschutes County can tackle alone. But this, I know this is a local plan, but I think that if an effort can be put there, that feels important.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that belongs here in the fifth strategy. I think there's certainly room for that. And yeah, seeing some heads nodding. Affirmative. Great. Great. All right. Well, with some edits, I think these are the 5 strategies we'll be moving forward with. So with no further ado, our next steps are some more community engagement around action planning. The actions, so there will be, each of these are components of the strategic plan: the visions, the milestones, the strategies, and the actions. The actions will have lead agencies or lead partners attached to them, and tighter timelines, where we don't have tight timelines other than our 5 and 10 years. The actions will be built around the 3-year priorities to move the strategies forward. So for action planning and getting into the nitty gritty of what it's going to take to implement these strategies, we're going to hold some small group meetings with you all as you're interested and other community partners. We've already started conversations with folks from the Bend La Pine School District, reaching out to others as well, some additional community-based organizations, some business partners, and wanted to get your thoughts on who else should we reach out to for their input on the actions that will be necessary to drive each strategy forward. So first I'll ask, who else should we be engaging? If you could be specific about what strategy or strategies they'd be best to offer input on, that would be really helpful. And then we'll get your signups for which strategies you're interested in shaping the actions for. So first, what additional partners aren't you seeing here or want to make sure are included in the action planning meetings over the next 2 weeks?
Do you have a list of, because these are kind of broad categories, do you have a list of who you actually have already engaged, so then we could fill in the blanks from there?
We don't have a list per se or top of mind. There are recommendations from Bentonville Pines School District. I know the deputy superintendent is eager to work with us and offer their school counselors input on some action planning to support young people. Business partners, we haven't met yet. Those meetings are this week. So we'll get more clarity on who's on board in what way over the next couple of days. And the additional community-based organizations are kind of, I don't want to name them because they were recommendations through school district partners. So we haven't actually gotten to that outreach or connection yet. I apologize for not having that list. But as you look at each strategy, is there anyone that pops up of, who would really help or needs to be a part of this conversation or will be key to driving the action forward in the community? If there's a community-based organization, or per the comment in the Q&A, faith-based partners that should be at the table. I imagine that particularly comes up for strategy 1, as well as they're mentioned in strategy 5, but I think it would be really important to bring them to the table for action planning around strategy 5 and 1 as well. But if there are specific partners and specific groups that you want us to engage for this. And
So Brittany,
can
I just ask? So it's for me, it's hard to think of like, or it would help if I knew that you're already including the whole HLC. There's so many of those groups who are interwoven with all of 5 of these strategies. So are you wanting less than the entire HLC list? Just the board of HLC? Kind of that would help give scope.
So I'll talk through the idea I have for these meetings, and maybe that'll help. This will be the place where we break apart the strategies and say, here is exactly what we will need to do as a community. Here's what the city will need to do. The cities will need to do, the county will need to do. Here's what our organizations will need to be ready to do. Here's what we'll require from other partners that we haven't even thought of yet. So to your question, Elaine, I don't think that's suited to a full HLC meeting, but we could certainly open it up to full HLC leadership to attend whichever meetings they're most interested in informing. I'm also open to, this plan doesn't work for us. We have too many stakeholders that will want to engage. Let's make it a big community-wide workshop for all 5. We could do that too. We could all get in a room together, or a very, very large room, and start working on all the actions across the board in one day together. That's an option too. But I'm straying from your question. Did I get to it in a way?
Yes, and I think that it is helpful. I would wonder, not to put her on the spot, but I would wonder what Colleen Thomas would think about engaging all of HLC, at least the CBO types.
Yeah, I think that's a great option. It's really expensive. Thinking about our current membership structure, I think that is an option. I kind of like the direction in which you're going, Brittany, in regards to breaking out by specific groups. One of the groups that I just thought of was like neighborhood associations, which was like a high blood pressure anxiety group, but I think that very valuable in the work that we're doing, kind of to Kristen's comment earlier, like we need to do the education and advocacy, and they are our partners, and to be able to do this work, we need them on board, and those are vital voices in our community that also need to be heard. And I think that could stray away necessarily from like what a full HLC group would be. And so I think being able to break out some of these strategic planning meetings would make a little bit more sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Would it be helpful if I drop a chart in our SharePoint for folks to recommend the specific organizations for each strategy to build this out over the next day or two? Okay, I'll do that. If folks could try to prioritize it in the next maybe 48 hours. We want to hit our timeline of finalizing everything by December 15th, by mid-December. I am also quite potentially planning a trip down to Bend if folks are open to in-person meetings. I haven't gotten a sense yet of whether that's something that folks are comfortable doing. And maybe that's something I can connect with Commissioner Chang and Councilor Perkins on offline. It's a little tricky to navigate the virtual world in these moments. So we'll see if that'll be another site visit down. I would love to see your faces and have some more coffee with you all, but also recognizing this pandemic is no joke. Thank you all so much. I am so excited about just everything that folks offered and your reviews here today. We had a few points that folks shared via email that I think can be integrated into the strategies and the action planning. So your ideas around data dashboards, mapping the community's assets have not gone unheard. They will definitely be integrated into these conversations over the next 2 weeks. Thank you all for everything you brought into analyzing the strategic plan. It's been really powerful to work on this with all of you. So with roughly our last 10-15 minutes, I apologize, we don't have more time for this, but we're going to move into some of that joint office conversation that we talked about earlier. So while we're rolling with our strategic plan, we're cementing our vision, our milestones, our strategies, getting rolling with our actions. We've also been asked by the Bend City Council and County Commission to help with this, keep helping with this joint office concept. So the 4 core components of the joint office, or core functions, I think we refer to them as, that the task force suggested at our last meeting was supporting partnerships, developing strategy, leading systems improvement. And again, this is a PDF that task force members should have gotten earlier today. And coordinating funding were the 4 that we recommended in our October meeting. During the joint city-county meeting, folks recommended that community engagement should be, as we've heard quite a few times today, it needs to be a core function of the joint office. There needs to be responsibility held there. So this last core function is an addition. That's why it's an updated 2-pager that you have in your inbox. And what we were asked to do is to start shaping the mission of the joint office to help build out this concept. So mission statements, different than vision statements. Vision statements articulate what we're looking ahead for, what we're hoping to do, our vision for the future. Mission statements define why something exists, why it's important, and the problems an organization aims to solve. It explains the plan based on what it wants to achieve. It's also externally focused. The vision is reflective of something that we built internally and we're sharing externally. A mission statement often just explains to external partners and the community more broadly, here's why this exists. So what we want to get clear on as we shape this concept with the city and the county are some of the things that we'd want to address in a mission statement. Who will the joint office be serving? How will it add value? And what channels and methods should the joint office adopt to be most effective? Now, what I want to be really clear about, I fully encourage the participation of folks from the county and folks from the city. I also think it'll be really helpful to hear from our collaborating agencies as well of what exactly you think about how this will add value and what will make it most effective. You've worked with the city and county as external partners. What do you need from them as they look to set up a joint office? But again, the conversation is clearly open to all. We have about 10 minutes here for this. So what is your sense of who the joint office should be focused on serving and supporting? As we look at the core functions, which I'm gonna pull back up, it's kind of clear to me that this is a community serving office that we've imagined, but also one that serves city and county administrators and elected officials to inform and kind of cross-pollinate on the strategies and priorities and resources necessary to achieve the 10-year vision. I'm curious how that resonates with folks. I think we've also been pretty articulate that the joint office will not serve people experiencing homelessness. It will not do direct service provision, but in its broader intent, I think it's serving the community comprehensive and including prioritizing people experiencing homelessness, not in direct service, but that is who it is intended and designed to ultimately be supporting. Does that resonate with folks?
I'm from the county, but I'll say something first because I'm really interested in hearing from our partners and providers. But yes, I agree that this isn't about us doing the actual services, this joint office. It's really about serving the providers in terms of finding funding, dealing with legislation, removing barriers, all of that stuff that the city and the county can work on in order to get our providers more resources, make their jobs easier, enable it so that they can do all of these things. So that's how I see it. That's just those are my thoughts.
I love that. I love that. Keith watched a whole thought process go through there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just eager to find out what it was, but I won't put you on the spot.
Yeah, I have 3-second thought processes and it comes up with nothing. Yeah, I think that for the cities, the solutions, the progress we need to make on homelessness are without boundaries, so that to the extent there was the county office that Redmond, Bend, et cetera, can use to implement ideas and advance policy and implement, that'd be handy. Otherwise, we'll have the situation, that we've had for the last few years and beyond, where City of Bend does something, Deschutes County does something, Redmond does something, all at different scales and at different levels of intensity. But having a coordinated effort will reduce repetition, which will bring benefit then to the governments.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just share. And I certainly want to create space for others as well. But for me, it's and I'm probably too simplistic, but and I'm just throwing the words out here, but it's something to the effect of it's creating capacity, establishing focus, and then coordinating expertise to implement the strategic plan.
Can you do that one more time?
I just try not to write a mission statement on the fly here, but it's creating capacity, establishing focus, and I don't know if coordinating expertise, or I don't know what the right word is, but something about expertise, the specialists, the experts in these areas to implement the strategic plan that we're creating right now.
Yeah.
So whatever the name is.
I love what Nick just said. I would just maybe add one sort of statement kind of capturing what I think Keith was alluding to earlier about efficiency and streamlining, avoiding duplication, all those things about what good government should be doing of harnessing our resources in an efficient way. I think that should be part of that mission.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's getting into our second and third questions of how the joint office will be adding value to the people it's serving or the organizations it's serving, and what channels and methods does it need to adopt to be most effective. A leading way of asking this third question would be, what do you wish government did differently on this issue? What do we want to make sure the joint office does to be more effective and more supportive of other efforts? So we can flip it to the affirmative there. What do you wish good government looked like on this issue in Deschutes County?
I think if we look at what is happening right now, then that would be my recommendation of what good government should be doing.
Can you say right now as in the task force? Or
as in, yes, as in every capacity, listening and putting action behind words and creating opportunities for providers to come to the same table with city and county.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Brittany, you used the word nimble before, and I think that's a great word. I think one of the important things, or one of the really valuable things, would be to eliminate the time lag between a problem developing and our being really informed about what's going on and what the response needs to be. And so I think that requires a mechanism where there's almost daily communication, or maybe daily communication between some folks in the joint office and people who are out there close to whatever the different problems are, so that there can be an effective and timely response to things, and not sort of have a problem suddenly be there and entrenched before we really are in a position to start acting on it.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So that point gets me thinking about, I guess particularly for Nick and Eric, like where would it be housed in the county? Under what department or division?
We haven't thought about it. It's a good question. And I see Eric Kropp has his hand up. Maybe he's thought about it.
Yeah, most likely it would report into administration, because it is broader. I mean, it's broader than just health services. Okay. Certainly it would work closely with Molly and Colleen and their team, but it's broader than health services.
Yeah. The synergy across is really important, to Molly and Colleen and your team, to folks at the city working on financing, budget, resources, community engagement more broadly. So I think that question of where will it live is fully unanswered as of yet, as we kind of navigate commitments to the concept and developing a governance structure and what that would look like to identify where it would best live. We have a lot of examples from around the country of how this could be structured. And I know that Deschutes County and the city of Bend are not the only communities in Oregon looking at this. And so as the state legislature maybe looks into supporting it, they may have some parameters for us to consider in governance as well. I do want to give us a 2-minute warning so that we have a couple of minutes to wrap up. I know we're in the thick of this conversation. And I also know that that folks are available from the city and the county to keep talking about the concept and keep shaping it and keep gathering input. So this is certainly not the end. This is the information to help us shape up a mission statement to bring back to the city and the county together. So this has already been really helpful. And I apologize, Eric, you had your hand up and then you answered a question, so I missed it. And then we'll go to Commissioner Chang, and then I'll turn it over to Councilor Perkins to wrap us up.
Sure. I just wanted to ask the group, we're going to go to the Board of County Commissioners next Monday and talk about the application for to the state for the houselessness for this office. And so my question to the group is what materials is the group comfortable with me sharing with the Board of County Commissioners next week? It would be put on an agenda, so it would be, the public would have access to it, of course. So is there any material that the group is comfortable with me sharing? I think it'll help the board with their conversation about the application.
So we have this 2-pager that is built, that was originally designed actually for that joint meeting. So I could also shape up a proposed mission statement and give folks a few days to give feedback on it based on this conversation, and maybe include that in the 2-pager as well, unless there are any concerns about sharing that information from other task force members or co-chairs. Okay. I'll get that out to folks too then.
Thank you, Brittany.
Sure, of course. Commissioner Chang.
Okay, I have a comment, but I just wanted to piggyback on what Eric was asking. A lot of the discussion about the joint office has revolved around, well, what is it going to be? What is the strategy that it's going to be implementing? And so, that circles us back to the strategic plan that we're developing at the Emergency Homeless Task Force. So, whatever level of draft is shareable from the Emergency Homeless Task Force to that discussion of the Joint Homelessness Office. It would be great to, and we can do this offline, but just to get clarification of kind of what level of draft, including action items or not, could we use for that discussion next week? But what I had wanted to put out there was when the question was posed, well, what's missing from city or county action on these issues right now? One of my big concerns is that these entities, city councils, county commissions, they are political bodies, and so I see a lot of assumptions. I see a lot of ideology creep into our deliberations on issues, and in the public safety realm, and actually in the health services realm, one of the best phrases and approaches, to go to approaches or methods or channels or methods that we often talk about is evidence-based practices. And so I wonder if there might be a room for that kind of phrase, evidence-based practices in the mission statement or somewhere associated with this joint office.
Absolutely. I think so. To your first question, I'm happy to edit the vision, milestones, and strategies based on today's conversation, integrating that evidence-based practices language, shape up the mission, and have that prepared to share, and then have our actions ready for mid-December to be shared fully then. The actions won't be ready for review on Monday, but happy to share that. Great. Awesome. And well, I appreciate your point on evidence-based practices too. All right. Well, thank you all. Councillor Perkins, do you want to close us out?
Sure. I told Brittany to sign me up for all the gushing, so I'm going to gush just for a second here to close us out. I just wanted to say, to all of the incredible people on this Zoom, your expertise, your compassion, your innovative ideas have really helped define this process and this work. And so thank you so much for your time. Commissioner Chang, it was such a pleasure convening this task force with you. Let's do it again sometime. And I wanted to highlight Mickey. Mickey, the tremendous amount of work that you have done getting this all started for us and keeping us on track and organized and offering solutions and so much more. We really couldn't have done this without you.
Wow, thank you.
Welcome. And Brittany, thank you for coming in and sharing your institutional knowledge with us and guiding us, but also listening to everyone here and taking our words and turning it into this, absolutely incredible strategic plan and vision for our community. Really can't thank you more. And speaking personally, these meetings have really taught me and inspired my own work on houselessness. And like Phil said at the beginning, I really look forward to committing to this plan and implementing this plan and really working with our community on engagement and buy-in. We have a lot of work to do, but it is made so much more approachable with the work that was sort of laid out with this task force. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Thank you so much. This has been such a tremendous experience. I hope it's been as fulfilling to you all as it has to work on it and to get to know the community. And hopefully I won't be a stranger. We'll see each other again real soon. Stay tuned for some action planning and more word from the city and county on the joint office. And echoing Councillor Perkins, just gushing over here. Take care, everybody. I hope you all have a great Tuesday.